Numerous Republican state legislators are trying to pass new voter restriction legislation, like limiting absentee and early voting. Meanwhile, Democrats in Congress are trying to pass laws that will expand access to the ballot box. The moves from both camps come after an election with record turnout in which there were multiple false charges of fraud by prominent Republicans like the former squatter Donald Trump. But let's make one thing fucking clear. High turnout had little to do with why Trump ended up being a one-term squatter. Trump lost because he was highly unpopular. He was a highly unpopular squatter, and he likely would have been defeated if turnout looked like it did in 2016. During his term in office, um, Trump's um, Trump's approval rating never hit 50 in the polls. In the lead up to the 2020 election, his approval rating was stuck in the low to mid 40s. The last person, which that was an actual person to be called president to overcome such daunting numbers, was Harry Truman in 1948. Elections that took place before the coronavirus pandemic ever took hold suggested that Trump's Republican Party was in deep shit anyway. His party lost a lot of ground relative to 2016 in the lower turnout special elections during the 2017 and 2018 period. Even in the special elections of 2019, which were weaker for Democrats, the Democrats still outperformed the 2016 baseline. These elections, on the whole, didn't have anywhere near the level of mail voting, a frequent punching bag for Trump, that the 2020 election did. In fact, new research from Stanford University suggests that the expansion of mail voting had little to do with the higher turnout or results with the 2020 election. To put emphasis on the unique environment that led to a lot of early voting by mail in 2020 to explain the high 2020 turnout seems especially strange when considering that 2018 had the highest turnout for any midterm in the last century. That was well before the coronavirus pandemic and shift to mail voting by a lot of Democrats. With all these elections, like the special ones like the 2018 midterms and the 2020 election, had in common was an unpopular squatter leading the Republican Party. Indeed, it's not clear at all to me that the results would have been any better for the GOP had the 2020 turnout looked like the 2016 election, but remember, that was the election that Trump won that he should have never won in the first place. We can see this from three different sources: the network exit polls, the American National Election Studies pre-election survey, and the final Pew Research Center poll taken with verified 2016 voters. In the network exit polls, the Biden versus Trump margin among those who said they voted in the 2016 election was the same among the ages of 25 and older. The youngest exit poll age bracket among which voters were eligible to cast a vote in 2016, as it was overall among the same age group. The state exit polls in the three closest states with 2016 the recall vote, like Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, has an average shift of 0 points as well. In the ANES poll, Biden's lead actually expanded by a point margin among those 22 and older, like old enough to have voted in 2016, and they said they voted in 2016 as compared to all registered voters in that same group. Finally, in a Pew Research Center's final 2020 pre-election poll, Trump's vote share was a single point higher, but Biden's remained steady among verified 2016 voters, and it was among registered voters that were 22 and older. The Pew poll suggested that Biden's margin was about the same among 2018 midterm voters as it was among all registered voters. All of these shifts are within the margin of error, but most importantly, all of these polls used different methodologies and arrived at the same conclusion. Now, the election was close enough in the margin of error, and this data is wide enough that we can't say what the exact electoral college result in 2020 would have been with the 2016 level turnout, but future studies with larger sample sizes and voter files can hopefully answer that for sure. It's unlikely that more data will change the big finding that turnout was not the determinating factor of the 2020 result. The lack of shift may be surprising to some, but it actually makes a lot of sense, and the biggest group of voters who said they cast a ballot in 2020 but not in 2016 was non-college educated voters. According to the exit polls, that meant more non-college educated white voters, which was, well, the non-college uneducated white voters, which was good for Trump and the electorate, but also meant that voters of color made up a larger chunk of the non-2016 voters, which was bad for Trump but good for us. But either way, Republicans are likely putting a band-aid on a bigger problem. If they think 2020 was about turnout, They'd be wiser to turn their attention to figuring out why a lot of Trump voters in 2016 turned on him this time.